All right, we've got a panel today. Let's bring up, come on up, guys. We've got David from Sunday Sounds, Stephen, Worship Coalition, and Doug Gould, Worship MD. So today we're going to talk about how do you get $1 million out of your budget. So I think one of the biggest hurdles at church can be figuring out budget issues and convincing your pastor to do that, to spend money, and I think that no one should be limited to innovating or implementation at your church, whether you have a small budget or a large budget or no budget at all. Like, you should be able to innovate in some way. So today we're going to talk about that. What are some of the areas, you guys, that you think that if you have let's just say you have a limited amount of money to spend, what are the areas in your church that are the most important to focus on? Or like, what's like the easy, low-hanging fruit places to spend money that would really make an impact?
I think you got to make a priority list of what your particular church needs. And is keep a running list. So we need this, we need this, we need this. How much budget do I have? Well, I can't afford that. So go to number 2. $100. It's a microphone. I'd say one of the easiest things to do to improve your sound for your front of house or your stream is pick better mics and teach people how to use them. That and loudspeakers are probably the 2 main ingredients. Mixers are very close to one another right now, analog or digital. But people are buying like the $100 mic package, which includes 5 mics. You know, I know you have a limited budget, but whatever your budget is, buy something that's going to sound good and going to last. And when you're checking mics out, just don't check out the sound quickly by saying check 1, 2. Put it through its paces, roll it around in your hand, see if it makes noise. What does it pick up? What does it reject? A lot of people don't think about rejection, but rejection will help your stream in your front of house sound a lot better. So microphones is my choice.
I like to talk about identifying where the coffee filters in your ministry are. So what I mean is you can have the most expensive high-end coffee beans of all time, roasted by some boutique person, like 1 bean at a time. But if you filter it through yesterday's coffee filter, it's going to taste like yesterday's coffee, right? So how do we translate that to what we hear, what we see, and how it feels in our rooms? What are the vast majority of our efforts filtering through at the end? Maybe the quality of our projection, the quality of our lighting. If we're filtering an incredible sounding band through a not incredible sounding sound system, maybe we should flip our budgetary priorities for a while. I think maybe we don't need to buy a brand new set of drum mics, but we should invest in the loudspeakers being able to represent the quality of the mics that we already have. So thinking about what is the last link in these chains and where is it holding us back? Maybe you just don't even know how to use it to its full potential and you don't need to spend any money at all. But you wouldn't realize the quality of new, improved microphones if you haven't properly gain staged your soundboard or made sure that your loudspeakers have enough wattage powering them to actually be pushing them in the way that they're intended to be pushed. So ask yourself what you're filtering everything through and if it's tasting like yesterday's coffee.
Discipleship. That's where I go to 9 times out of 10. Your technology can be amazing, and your people might not have the heart that it needs to run that to be effective. Those are just tools, right? Just like Facebook, just like the internet, right? Social media. It's not the tool necessarily as much as it is the heart behind using the tool and how to be effective with it. And so if you're going to have a minimal budget, pour into your people and make sure that they know where it's coming from. Only transformed hearts can transform other hearts. And we can do that through lights, and we can do that through sound and great equipment. At the end of the day, though, we're talking about the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that can be spread free 3.0, through people And so that's the most inexpensive budgetary thing, although it is probably the most time-consuming. So while it might be free, it still costs your family something, right? It still costs your time something.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking about you could, if you're like, man, we want better sound, and so you're like, well, we're gonna buy this like $8,000 soundboard. I don't even know how much soundboards cost, but all right, you're like, we're just gonna buy the better soundboard. You could have like the best tech back in the booth, but if someone doesn't actually know how to use it or how to mix, even the basic fundamentals of mixing, not gonna do you really great. Sometimes there's people that have like the best guitar in the world out there, and they don't really even know how to play guitar. They just like cool gear, but then you hear like someone with like a really cheap guitar, and they can play and they can know how to make it beautiful and make music out of it. So I would say a really good place to put money is training, kind of like what you're saying. Like even if you have this old soundboard, put some money into maybe just training your volunteers on how to actually build like just a good fundamental mix, gain structure, EQ, all that stuff. What would you guys say is an area in church where you see money not utilized the best, maybe in a worship budget? What's an area that maybe is like, we could actually save a lot of money there without sacrificing quality?
Well, before you put any equipment in any room, I think a lot of churches don't do this. They don't pay attention to the room. So there's a lot of do-it-yourself things that you can do now to treat your room so it doesn't have a lot of flutter echo, and it absorbs certain things that are going to just go back and forth, bass traps to prevent standing waves. One company's like Prime Acoustics, another Oralex. They'll actually have a calculator. You send them your dimensions. They send you a package which would work for your church. And if you have people in your church who are handy, you can slap it up. That saves a lot of money from hiring an acoustician. And if you're building a new church, you should really invest in looking how to make that room work for your culture. Is it going to be piano and choir? Is it going to be a rock band? Maybe it's both. But you're going to have to do some investigative stuff to make sure the room works for whatever it's supposed to be working for. Otherwise, all the money you spend on gear is worthless. And when pandemic hit, everybody was doing streaming immediately. It went from 0 to 60. I used to teach people in front of house mixing, mic applications, and now it was all about streaming. People using an iPhone, to whatever. And then they'd have the gear maybe in a separate room, a studio suite, but one guy in the church knew how to mix, and anybody else who went in that room didn't know how to mix. So it goes back to what you said, the training. How many hours does it take to be good at something? 10,000 hours. And you're mixing an hour a week, every other week? It'd take you 100 years to get to 10,000. So you're going to need some help. Find some help along the way. Other churches, commune with each other. Have a fellowship of a technical nature. So whether that guy's a Roman Catholic or he's a Presbyterian, he speaks in tongues. A fader is a fader.
That preaches.
So is the newest technology out there always the best? Or is there a time when worship teams should just be maybe just content with what you've got and not spend anything?
Coming from a non-tech guy, I would say, just my interaction with my iPhone and my Mac. There's always a new iOS update, but MainStage will still crash until MainStage catches up with iOS. And so from my perspective, no, like the newest technology is always going to be adopted by early adopters, and that's great. And if you're an early adopter church in the room, keep doing it because you fix all the bugs for the rest of us. But thank you for all of you out there who do that. But I tend to hang back, and I go back to what Doug had said, opening statement, which is, what is the need of your community? Because if we're just doing it for technology's sake, or if we're just doing it for position's sake, or showmanship, even if we're coming at it from a good posture heart, even if we've got great motives, if it's not meeting the needs of the community, then just like the last question, that's budget that could have been spent investing in people and opportunities rather than trying to upgrade things as soon as they come out.
This is really all talking about stewardship, right? We're spending money that is not our own, right? And we want to be good stewards of it. Your newest dollar is often not your wisest dollar. So if you've been wanting something for a week, see if you still want or can justify that thing several months down the line. And see if you have a plan for how you're actually going to use it well. How are you going to honor the tithes and offerings of every member of your congregation who made that possible? And if you can't articulate that plan to yourself, you definitely can't articulate it to your senior pastor or the budgetary committee or whatever. And at the end of the day, you might have something with cobwebs on it that you were so excited about for about a week. Right. And then you realize, oh, I don't actually have any infrastructure for handling this new shiny bit of technology. But if it's been something that you're like, man, I really wish we had that, and then a month later, like, man, I really wish we had that, and you have this history of areas where you're falling short, and you have a plan on, here's how we can actually take a step, and here's what the actual measurable benefit might be, then those are your wisest dollars, where you can say, I'm being a good steward, and here is why, and here's why I think this is going to further the faith of people on my team and in my congregation.
That's really good. Do you guys have any tips for how to have that conversation with the pastor or the board or whoever it is you need to talk to get approval for this types of stuff? Let's say you want to change the soundboard in the back or get all new microphones. How do you have that combo? Because it may be a topic that they don't understand or maybe even care about, maybe in a way, but...
Yeah, I tell my pastor, you've spent a lot of money on video, but Scripture says faith comes by hearing. And we walk by faith, not by...
Oh, that's savage. That's good.
I mean, in ministry, we're all about multiplication.
That's the last talk I had with my former pastor.
It's always good to use Scripture. Against people.
Your church leadership is all about growing people, right? Enriching the lives of your existing congregants and hopefully reaching new people with the message of Christ. So use that, right? Talk about how you think that these investments in technology, these budgetary expenses, can actually further the message of the gospel. And be as specific as possible. Talk about the long-term investment strategy. If you're going to buy a whole new drum set, talk about how long you think it's going to last. Talk about how you think having a bad-sounding drum set makes it harder for you to recruit new volunteers, and having a good-sounding drum set would set them up for success. But you have to be able to articulate the intrinsic value and the actual value. Like, how often am I going to need to replace the drum heads? And do I know how to tune drums, or are we going to have to bring somebody in to tune the drums? You know, like, do we have somebody that can actually run these cameras? Do we know what white balance is? You know, and you have to be able to articulate, this is what we're going to do, right? And talk the language of what the return is going to be in terms of how people are actually encouraged. What's it going to do for people in the seats? That's what it's really about.
Yeah, and to tag on to that too, have different options, levels of budget. I know there's a small church in northern Iowa, tiny little town called Britt, and the elders always wanted to, keep money in the budget and not spend it on anything. And then we had the deacons that wanted to spend the money on everything, right? And they're just like, whatever's the most expensive thing, go get it. And so I would always come into the room going, here's option A. This is like the least barrier to entry. But then here's like an upgraded middle ground, and then here's like the blown out, like this is what I wish things could be like for the next 20 years. And by giving them options, it also helps them walk through the vision of connecting it to the people rather than just connecting it to a number, right? And if they can connect it to the person, then they can make the best decisions as leadership along with you as to what budget is appropriate to spend to reach that group of people.
This is all good stuff. I think also setting the expectation, right, of instead of throwing on expenses just last minute on people and surprising them, it's always good to be able to communicate that stuff ahead of time. So if we're good planners, and thinking ahead, okay, when budget season comes around, really plan out and think, like, what is it I'm going to need so that there's no surprises, because sometimes surprises don't go over super well. But it does all come down to, like, also, like, vision casting. I love that you said that. And that's an art. Like, it is an art to learn how to vision cast. Here's why you need a new microphone or a new projector or something. But to get everybody excited about it and on board of the why behind it, not just like, we need this, and they may think that you're like just a demanding creative, but that they understand the why and they can get on board and behind you on it. That's so important. I think you also build trust by doing that, by the way. If you do that consistently, those two things, planning and vision casting, explaining the why, you build trust with your leaders, where then they know that, okay, this person's not just out like blowing money, not just like blowing church money. Like, they're really thinking about what we're doing and the reason why we're spending it. Do you guys have any resources that you'd recommend that are maybe great for churches on a budget? I know a lot of churches are struggling financially right now, even in this season. It's kind of been hard, coming back from COVID. I know some churches are facing like lower attendance, with the economy. Giving is kind of like, who knows what's going on there. It can be challenging. So let's just say you're at a church and you're on a tight budget. Yeah. Any resources that you really recommend for these guys to check out?
Yeah, there's one right in your own church. Your old equipment.
Ooh.
What if you had some piece of furniture and you wanted a new couch? You'd probably either give your couch away or sell it. So I did a swap meet in my community with other churches. I told them to bring all their gear to this parking lot. I give them a table. And they bought all the gear that was just collecting dust in their closets. And there was some churches who maybe couldn't afford to buy something there. So we would donate it to them. They would give anything to have your old piece of gear that was sitting in your closet. Whatever money you recoup from that. We had a broadcast studio in our church years before I joined. It was in Princeton, New Jersey. And they used to have a broadcast facility there. And they had the men come and clean out the church one morning. There was all kinds of weird stuff down there. Got there a little late. Guy's carrying out a box, and out of it I saw a speaker with some wires hanging up. He says, I got to look in there. So I stopped the guy, took all this junk out. Bogan PA had old speakers with tears in them. You know what was at the bottom of them? 2 mint Pultec EQs. And they were headed to the dumpster. The church needed a new keyboard badly. I told the pastor, I got these Pultecs, I think they're worth something. He says, Doug, just keep them, it's just junk. I says, it's not junk, pastor. So Vintage King bought them from me for $4,000, sent me a check. Sight unseen. I had the check made out to the pastor, but I didn't tell him that. I says, hey, thanks for giving me that stuff, man. I made $4,000 on it. He goes, what? I says, yeah, I really appreciate that. Showed him the check, said $4,000 out to Nassau Christian Center. We need a new keyboard. He goes, get whatever you want. That helped my budget like you couldn't believe. But you also might be blessing other churches with some stuff that you have that you're not using.
Let me chime in real quick because it goes along with what he just said. Leaving a legacy at your church, I can't tell you the number of times I hear of worship leaders leave a church and then a new worship leader comes in. We get emails all the time to Loop Community where it's hey, I just joined staff at this church. The worship guy left. I guess he previously bought like a Loop Demus pedal and a track rig, and I found him in like a drawer somewhere. The buttons are broken. I can't imagine, there's probably so much gear at churches that was purchased by previous people that never has been documented, or it's just not organized. And I would say, you know what, whatever church you're at right now, leave a good legacy for when you're maybe not going to be there. Keep this stuff organized, sell the things that aren't being used, maybe keep a spreadsheet of what hardware you actually have, what needs to be fixed. I just think that you could set up that church for long-term success. If you think about it that way, you're helping yourself, but you're also going to help that church for generations. So
we spent so much of the last 2 years pivoting, right? I mean, we've had to do so many things we never thought we would have to do. Investing in new technology, exploring entire new ways to try and be together. But more often than not, for a while, maybe we were feeling pretty disconnected, either because we were practically, physically separate, or because we were doing all these new things and we didn't have energy for doing the things we would typically do. So if you're on a super tight budget, there might just be some reaffirming up of the foundations you already have that would be worth spending time on doing before you spend another dime. Right? There's probably a lot of head knowledge that volunteers on your team had before 2020, and it's just kind of atrophied a little bit because you guys have had to go all in on these other ways of doing things. And if you don't take a little time to say, like, what have we just kind of like lost in these last couple of years, and what could we like bring back? What was really working? What could we double down on and strengthen? Pulling those intangible resources, like you're pulling hardware off the shelf. Let's see what's in our people's heads that we could rekindle that maybe went dormant. And how could we bring some of that back up? And then how would we maybe budget differently if all of a sudden the mixes started sounding better again because we remembered, we had some best practices, and then we were, I got to mix the live stream and the front of house, so maybe a front of house suffered for 2 years and just forgot some best practices. Bringing those back in could shift the 2023 budget entirely, but you have to just acknowledge that, man, it's been a weird couple of years, and there's maybe some refocusing that we can do right now before we look to the next 5 to make sure that we're seizing the right opportunities, that those budget dollars are going towards something that will actually be bearing fruit for the next 5 years.
And just about every sponsor ministry company that is represented at this conference, at some point in time, is giving something away. And I know we've worked together in the past on prior records, and we're working together on this current record. And one of the things that we talk about every time that we put something on Loop Community is please give it away for free for the first month. We want it. We would rather have the songs in people's hands than for the cost to keep them from leading the song. Now, obviously, we want people to buy tracks, and we want people to buy chord charts from Praise Charts, right? But Praise Charts right now is giving away all of our chord charts, Worship Coalition charts, for free. You can go on there right now. Now, we're not Elevation, we're not Bethel, you probably haven't heard our music yet, but if you did and you gave it a chance, you'd realize that, man, there's some great songs on this album. And so now we won't do that forever because I want to support Ryan, I want to support Matt, I want to support all these amazing people, right? So that we can keep doing stuff like this. But at the end of the day, if you're truly paying attention in relationship with these companies, don't just be a consumer of these companies, be in relationship with these companies, because that's what they truly want. And at the end of the day, you can get a lot of amazing resources for a discount or for free at times. And when you do have the budget, bless the snot out of them and keep buying stuff from them when you do have the ability to do that.
All right, last question. I'm a church, and I don't know what's going on technology-wise. We would just want it to be better. We want to improve, and I'm hiring you guys as a consultant to come into my church and just spend an afternoon to look around and be like, what needs to happen, like, to make this just better? What are the first areas that you're looking at when you walk in? Doug?
I got hired by a church to heal the sound man. Walking in my shadow would just make his ears better, I guess. So I said, look, I'll come up, I'll check it out, rehearsal, service, whatever. See what he's got. Yeah, he really needs help, man. I hope you can help him. Okay. So I watched the service. Worship leader runs up to me. So this is all observation. I'm here to just observe, right? He runs up to me. So what do you think? You can help him? Can you heal him? You put your hands on his ears? So actually, you didn't do a bad job. What? Yeah, your band stinks. And there's not a sound man worth of salt that can make that sound good. And I left. I think worship leaders need to work with the techs to get all on the same page. It isn't the band's, it's the band's responsibility to give him something he can present. Garbage in, garbage out. If you aren't directing your band, you're doing them a big disservice. I got 5 guys up there all playing what they want to do on their own dime. Chart, chord, and lyric, that's it. There's no annotation about when to play, what to play, how loud, how soft, anything. It's just go for it. And if you're not directing, arrange the band so they start listening to each other and have some space there. You don't have to play all the time. I remember when I was in concert band, I was the worst trumpeter in the band. I played piano and jazz band. I'm okay on keyboards. Bad trumpet. You know what my music looked like? 32 bars of rest. I I'd be counting. Then the pretty little flute player winks at me, and what? Where am I? And my note was the 8th note on the upbeat of the 3rd beat, and I came in a beat early. Bad! Why don't you just tell them when to play? They don't even have to read music. Don't play here. It's just acoustic guitar. I don't need the Les Paul right now. And if you do all that and arrange first, because you don't have much time to rehearse, do you? How much do you rehearse? Like Hillsong United? I mean, you're not full-time. So arrange the band and tell them what to play, when to play, and then give that information to the sound man so he knows when to mute mics and when to unmute them. That's it.
All right, real quick. Where do you go first in the church, and what are you going to spend your money on first?
I asked the worship leader how often volunteers quit, and then asked he or she to think about, well, what's one thing that you could change to make it so they're more likely to stay? And put money into that thing, whatever that thing is.
I look at the dynamic between the lead pastor and the worship pastor. And because that dynamic is crucial, even if they're wildly different in their approaches to leading the church, if they're unified on the stage, if they're unified off the stage, they're unified on the stage. And so I tend to go towards counseling, investing in budget in counseling and helping them talk that out, because everything else stems from that relationship in the church.
It's good. Can we give these guys a round of applause? It's awesome.